Hey, what's up? We're going to take a second. We're going to talk about basically creating or maintaining a performance science infrastructure, even in the wake of some changing circumstances. So, just kind of if you think about what performance science is, it's not the reliance on technology. It's certainly not the singular reliance on any one system. It's a mentality, it's a philosophy of using information in different streams of data to make educated decisions. Data can come from a lot of different sources. It can be quantitative in nature from an athlete wearable. It could be quantitative in nature from me collecting metrics from observation and tallying. It could be qualitative in nature. So me simply tracking information and just qualitatively assessing an athlete and keeping that information over time. So basically, that's the root of everything that we're doing. So when we think about the infrastructure of what performance science is, especially here at Penn State, it doesn't have to change that dramatically, even if things may look a little bit different in regard to group size, the way we train, even the way we coach. So I want to kind of run down a couple different things here, especially as it pertains to us. And I want to really think about focusing on the infrastructure. If we think about the infrastructure, everything else will really fall in hand as we move forward. So the first thing I want to think about is just daily operations and logistics. As a coach, in this current state, we want to always model great behaviors, and we want to wear our mask at all times. Okay, that's going to really model the good behavior for our athletes, and we can help to hold everybody accountable within the organization. Okay, the second thing, when we're thinking about organizing our groups, there are some differences in group size, training organization, maybe venue. Okay, we need to factor that into our plan and understand how that may play a role in how we normally coach. This may also impact the way we do actually coach and provide feedback, how we provide instruction, or what we have on here called management style, how I actually organize my group and how I command the flow of the room or the field or the training environment. Okay, from experience this summer, I think we in this group think it's really important, if your sport relies on a whistle, to find a way to practice using your whistle while wearing your mask or gaiter. There are other options out there with electronic whistles and things of that nature, but if you're going to rely on a whistle, a traditional whistle, it's important for you, one, to be able to practice with that, and two, it's also important for you to be able to practice coaching using your loud voice that you'll need out on the field or court prior to being able to doing that on day one. Okay. The next one, when we actually think about organizing training and loading, it's important to understand the impact the smaller group size may have on the density of training within a session. If I have a normal session that I always do, or let's just say an individual period where I'm working with a certain group of athletes within the team, and I always do the same drill every single year, if I cut the athletes, let's say, in half and keep the same amount of volume, even if it's a shorter amount of time, there is a risk of having a little bit denser practice and intensity inside that period of practice. That's not bad. It's not good. It's just something we need to be aware of, and we need to take account of that. Okay. We also need to think about how we use our exercises. So different things with our schedule may be altered slightly. We may be doing things in a different order per se, depending on field or facility availability. We need to think about how one impacts the other. Getting a little bit more into collection of information. Remember, we're trying to establish an infrastructure. It's not the reliance on one system or one set of information. It's creating an infrastructure of information flow so that I can gather it, sort it, and then make a decision based on that. So the next couple that we're going to talk about are wellness surveys, different forms of athlete wearables, force plate testing, and NordBord testing. When we think about our wellness surveys, many of us have really relied on doing this in person through a lot of our careers. Not only do we ensure that we get all of our athletes checked off at that period of time, but it allows us to have a one-on-one engagement with them from time to time on a daily basis, and it also allows us to really get a feel for the mood of the organization when we do that. Sometimes you can also have like a maybe an iPad at a kiosk when they check in on a day-to-day basis, maybe at the nutrition station. Given the nature of what we're going through, that may not be an option. So some other things that we may think about doing is walking around and just encouraging athletes to do it on their own device, using Teamworks or text message to send that out, but then working to follow up, like I mentioned, just being always in communication with our athletes. But the days right now of working with a single tablet and asking athletes to use the same device, that may not be the best method at this point. Okay, athlete wearables. At this point, I think it would be really, really wonderful if we can empower our athletes to set up and break down their own equipment. Okay, so if athletes are wearing different types of wearables on the field, it could be a catapult GPS in the backside of their shirt. Let's encourage them with the box set up in the locker room. Let's encourage them to put that in themselves, and then following practice, put it back in the charge case. If we're going to be using, let's say, blast sensors in baseball or softball, let's encourage the athletes to learn how to put them on themselves without having to expend different staff members to be able to do that. Not only does it allow them to become part of the training experience and the monitoring experience, it pushes accountability on them too, and it creates a little bit more ownership in what we're doing. Would also like to stress that no matter what, we want to, if it's a wearable and the athletes are coming in contact with it, we want to make sure that we clean them thoroughly after every single use. Even if it was just a small amount of time, we want to make sure we're cleaning that, following every guideline that we've been involved with during this return to sport during COVID-19. Okay, with force plate testing, consider teaching athletes the jumps at the beginning of the semester, especially if I'm going to do this often. Okay, so just go through the jumps or the different types of tests that you may be doing on the force plate. Teach them thoroughly one time, and then you can basically use feedback and corrective feedback through the semester to adjust or to give some information if you need to. Would always encourage you, this goes with the Nord board here coming up too, integrate your testing into training as opposed to doing it in isolation. So instead of doing my testing before training or at a different scheduled period of time, let's see if we can just integrate it into training. Now, understand that sometimes that may kind of change the flow of our training session. But if I'm doing some jumps, it's really easy to just put it near the top of my training card, following some of my warm up and activation exercises before I get into the big strength lifts. I'm still fresh. I'm already warmed up, and I'm really going to get a good reading there. We want to avoid doing testing toward the end of the lift, just because you may be in a pre-fatigue state at that point. Okay, but early in the lift, when you're already doing some power movements, just put it in there, and it'll really help with the flow of everything. You can do the same thing with Nord board. Okay, so the thing that we think about with the Nord board is just integrate it into some of your post chain work. So if you're already doing Nordic curls, let that be one of your sets. If you're already doing some glute ham raises, let that be one of your sets, and just integrate it into your training. We'd also encourage you, if you're a field-based sport, to utilize your Nord board testing on days where you're really not going to sprint after. Just we want, sprinting is very demanding, and we want to be able to do that in a pre-fatigue state. Okay, so we want to try to avoid testing, especially the Nord board, before we sprint. Okay, the next two involve recovery and then just education, and they kind of go hand in hand a little bit as well. So when we think about recovery, it's really easy for us to think about isolated tools. Okay, so it's really easy for us to think about the cold tub as a recovery tool or a foam roller, and that's what's going to help me. But we want to really reconceptualize this, especially right now when some of our tools may not be available due to the nature of social distancing. So instead of teaching recovery by the way of a tool, consider teaching it from a principles-based perspective. So think about the balance of the central nervous system in the sympathetic or gas pedal and the parasympathetic side, which is like the brake pedal. There's a lot of different ways that I can activate and really become sympathetic pre-training. And there's also ways that I can recover and become more parasympathetic after. Consider teaching that as opposed to tools. And then find ways, maybe innovative ways to encourage athletes to build their own recovery tools, at home so they're always available, or if they're traveling. And then finally, this is kind of something that we're always pushing, but just let's work to teach athletes the why behind what we're doing. If we understand the why, everyone in the organization has buy-in to the why. We're all going to be able to understand the direction we're going, and we can take more ownership in that. Always think about the power of digital media. It could come in the form of social media, teamwork, even simple text messages or public posting in your facility. But in all, I want to encourage everyone to think about performance science and the use of information not just as tools. We can gather information in a lot of different ways. Think about it as a way to make better, more educated decisions. In this time that we're in right now, I would encourage everyone to be simple, okay? Find ways to automate flows of information, find ways to automate and empower our athletes during the data collection process. But by all means, be simple, be consistent, and use your information to make great decisions. Thank you guys. Hope everybody's doing well. Can't wait to see everybody on campus here soon. Take care.